for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled are Jennifer Sage Holmes and photographer Arthur Tress. Director, college professor Jennifer Sage Holmes was raised in Buffalo, New York. Got her Bachelor of Arts in Painting at SUNY Purchase, and an MA in Theater, and a PhD in Performance Studies at Northwestern University. She was in the Peace Corps, stationed in the Philippines for about 8 months, and I wonder if that has anything to do with the rest of your career. We'll find out. Jennifer's been teaching for several years at Whittier College, where she chairs the Theater and Communication Arts Department. Was your education all geared toward directing?
I think in a way, yes. I started off, as you said, in painting, and I did a lot of dancing and performance. Mm-hmm. And people were always saying, you need to focus, you need to do one thing only. And that was very difficult for me because they seemed so interconnected. And it wasn't until I kind of stumbled upon directing that all of those pieces, in terms of wanting to tell a story, wanting to kind of interpret other cultures, wanting to have visual elements and choreographic elements and dialogue, that it kind of all came into place. So
it seemed when I was reading about what you've done in your bio, that you did have all this, and it was almost like an eclectic background, like, what can I do and where can I go?
It was an eclectic background. I think it really fits well together. And when I was at Northwestern, I went for a theater kind of intensive, and then it was while I was there that I stumbled upon performance studies, which I loved because it's so interdisciplinary, and that's where things really started to fall together for me.
Talking about that performance and traveling in the Peace Corps, did that have any influence? The Peace Corps?
I think
the
so.
Philippines?
The Peace Corps is a really wonderful organization. For me, at the time when I was in the Philippines, the Subic Bay contract was up for renewal. And so I think they kind of inundated the Philippines at that time. And so my placement wasn't as specific as some of my colleagues who had wonderful placements. So I had a lot of time to think. And so what ended up happening for me, at that point, I realized I really wanted to go back and study theater. I had loved painting, I had loved dancing, but I really wanted to go back and immerse myself in theater. Up until that point, I had done it more on an underground basis.
That's what I was wondering, when you're in a foreign country, if you see the work that they're doing, the theater, the dance, the kind of the ethnic qualities of the country. And if it influenced you in any way.
I think traveling does influence, because I think there's such a place for reflection, and I think that there's more space to think and to respond, and you don't get caught in the treadmill as much. And I think that being there really did give me time to kind of think about translating ideas.
You're teaching, so you're putting your expertise to good use. Is there a difference when you're teaching students and when you're directing professional actors?
Yeah, I think that professional actors have more of life to juggle. You know, when you're working with the students, you know they're there, and they're there to do kind of one thing, to study. And I think the adults balancing their professional life and everything else that they need to do, it's.
Does the material make any difference?
Yeah,
with the
absolutely.
actors?
I mean, I think there are some things, as talented as the young actors are, I think there's some material, they just don't have the gravitas, the life experience to really understand. I think I've done this play, Lorca in a Green Dress.
Yes, I was just going to ask you about it.
With students and with professionals, and it's very
different.
Is it mixed? All professionals.
It's Nilo Cruz.
Is the playwright amazing?
Who is a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's fantastic. I love his work. I've seen a lot of it, and I'm dying to see this.
Such a wonderful person, too.
Did you know him? Did you have a relationship with him?
I do. I consider him my friend.
Oh, so that's good. So you know the insight into how to attack the work.
I think I understand him as a person. He's a very, very generous person. And I think that he loves language, and he was very inspired by Lorca, who's a poet and a playwright.
Spanish.
Yeah, and I think that it does make a difference when you know the playwright.
Talk a little bit about Nilo and how he became interested in Lorca, and where this starts with Lorca's death. Is that right?
Yeah, so the play Lorca in a Green Dress starts with Lorca's execution in the Spanish Civil War, which was on August 16th, 1936.
And that's a true fact.
And this is a true fact, and it's based on the historical real person, Federico Garcia Lorca, who was born in Spain in 1898. And Nilo was very inspired by his poetry. And
the words, then.
Yeah, the words and the story. And I can't remember the exact specifics, but it was like Lorca kept speaking to him, and so he wanted to put him in a piece. And so what happens in the play is Lorca finds himself in the Lorca room, which is a room of purgatorio, a room of the soul.
Right.
And in that room, he is forced to come to terms with his death, and in coming to terms with his death, he's able to ascend to another level and kind of realize the significance of his life.
And he meets different people.
He meets different people who are parts of himself.
Oh, that's how it is.
Who are parts of himself. They're people who are in the Lorca room who are playing aspects of himself. They're not like split personalities. They're people like who are actors, and they say, we're going to play this part of you. So that's how the characters are formed.
And let's go back just a little bit, because we were talking about student actors and professional actors, and this play is
professional actors.
Totally professional. And where is the venue where it's being shown?
It's at a beautiful theater, Casa 0101 in Boyle Heights, a beautiful new theater, and it opens on July 20th.
And Casa 0101 is a real wonderful thing for that community, isn't it?
It is.
It recognizes the community.
Yes, it's so vibrant. I've been there a couple times, and there's always an enthusiastic audience there. They've done a wonderful job.
From Latin background? Is most everything there?
No, I mean, I don't exactly know the complete artistic vision. Josefina Lopez is the artistic director.
Who's a great writer, too.
Yes, she is. And she and Nilo met each other when they were working with Maria Irene Fornes.
Is that when they met?
They met years ago when she was working on Real Women Have Curves.
Way back.
Yeah.
Well, Nilo's plays I've seen in New York, you know, the Two Girls and a Piano,
yes.
And is that what it was?
Yep.
And
Two Sisters
and a Piano. And several of those that all were based in Cuba.
Right.
Because that's where he's from.
That's right.
Several of his works. And he tells what he knows.
That's right. But it's interesting because he tells what he knows, but he also says, write about what you don't understand.
Oh, that's interesting, too.
Yeah.
And this is not just a straight play. There's music, there's choreography, and you talked about dancing. How did you do that?
It's very surreal, and it's kind of magic realism, I would say. It's very ensemble-based, and you kind of throw ideas out, and you say, how can we enliven this text and bring it to life? Lorca has a beautiful quote on theater. He says, theater is poetry from the page made human. That's a Lorca quote. Theater is poetry from the page made human.
And you're making it human.
So, and we have had a great group of people to work with to do that.
The music, is it original?
Some of it is original music, and some of it is kind of classic Spanish folk songs and flamenco.
Do you choose it?
Nilo specified it in terms of what the songs are in the script.
Oh, really?
And some of them are existing songs, and some of them, it's just the words, they're his lyrics, and you could create your own song that the lyrics go to.
Does he come to see the play, or I don't know.
I don't know if he's gonna. He's working on a piece right now, and he's very involved in it. He said he wasn't sure. He's seen a rehearsal of Lorca in the Green Dress when I did it with Whittier College, and he's seen Beauty of the Father when I've directed that play. And then we've worked on a couple other projects together that he's seen.
And talking about Whittier College again, you took a group to Barranquilla, students, and that's an island.
Barranquilla is in Colombia.
Colombia, yeah.
Barranquilla, Colombia. We went to the International Theater Festival.
Oh, is that right?
And we took 11 students and we did Lorca in a Green Dress. We mounted that there in 2009 at the theater festival.
Is that where you did it? So you've been directing this. You're very close to this material.
I am, but it's amazing to me. It's like a good poem or a good book or a great film. Every time you revisit it, it's different. It's not like doing the same play. It's like it's springboarding from the same idea, but it changes as you change.
Does it get better?
I hope
can you
so.
feel that it gets better, or does the acting make it better, or the timing?
Yeah, I mean, it's different issues and different challenges with each cast, but I think with this cast, it's gotten deeper because of the maturity of the actors. I definitely think it's gotten deeper, and I think the more you go into something, there are more nuances that appear.
You learn more, do you think? Are you learning more?
Absolutely.
The intermission comes at Casa 0101. There's an art exhibit.
Yes.
Not just during the intermission, but it's there. You have an art exhibit component at the theater. And is it from Whittier as well?
No, this is an exhibit that was curated with Casa 0101, and it's called Liminality, and it deals with a kind of transcendent space between one reality and another, which is a great kind of pairing for Lorca in a Green Dress, which is also about liminality and him moving from one understanding of being to another.
That's so great to be able to go to the theater.
And see visual art. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful work, I must say.
Well, I'm so happy you came and talked to us about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back with Arthur Tress. Hello, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm here with photographer Arthur Tress, who was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. He went to Lincoln High School in Brighton Beach and Bard College. Arthur's the consummate traveler, and early on he took a film class in Paris when he was on his travels. Even though he studied painting and art history, he chose a career path in photography. That work is in the permanent collections of MoMA, the Metropolitan, the Whitney Museum, LACMA, San Francisco Museum, the Pompidou, as well as other U.S. and international museums. Arthur, with all the work that you did and all the places that you went, you became a self-taught photographer.
Well, actually, in the 50s, there really weren't many schools of photography unless they were really kind of for industrial commercial photography. There really were no photo galleries or even museums interested in collecting photography. So, but you know, photography process, especially black and white, is fairly simple. So you could just pick it up from, you know, magazines and books.
Is that how you did it?
Yeah,
Is that what
sure.
you decided to do? Why was Lincoln High School so important at that time?
Well, it was a very unusual high school in that it had a very good art department where you could almost take all art and photography and sculpture and painting, graphic design, and it was really an integrated part of the school curriculum. And it's kind of a shame because so many of those programs have been eliminated recently. But
and you were lucky. You had another kind of a repository of art. You had the Brooklyn Museum.
Well, when I was 5 or 6 years old, I used to sneak up the street and go into the Brooklyn Museum and wander around all the empty rooms of mummies and
Such a great museum, isn't it?
African art.
And was that a big influence? You took painting, but you picked up the camera instead. And when I look at a lot of your work, it looks like you're painting a picture. Do you try to do that?
Well, when I speak to photographers, young photographers, I say that you need to really look at all the great paintings and artwork, including tribal art, rather than just books or photography, because all those artists, painters, were dealing with very specific visual problems that you can learn from. You know, compositions and
composition is what makes the photograph, I guess.
Well, it used to. Now I think photography more is about sharing it very quickly, which is all right.
But one of the things that I was wondering is when you were traveling, was that the beginning of your photography?
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
Is that how it came about?
Yeah, I kind of did a lot of worldwide traveling. Well, everyone, when they finish college, wants to visit Europe.
Right.
But then I kind of extended it to Egypt, and I got interested in photographing tribal people.
You just mentioned that. Is that what came to mind?
Yeah, so I began actually getting my first job was working for the Swedish Ethnographical Museum, photographing African tribes and
Really?
the Lap people and the Toda people in India.
What were you using? What kind of camera were you using?
I was using my regular, what's called a 2 1/4 medium format camera.
And where did you get that camera?
Actually, I got it. The first one I got was from my sister, who was very supportive and generous.
So
to
she
me.
started you
Yeah.
on that. I was reading this book, Arthur Tress, San Francisco, which has so many fantastic stories in it. But I guess when you were very young, your brother gave you a camera.
Oh, he gave me a 35 millimeter camera that was a German camera from World War II.
Oh.
And that's what people kind of used in those days.
You're still using a fantastic camera, a
Yeah.
Hasselblad?
Yeah, this is my Hasselblad, and it takes square photographs. And somehow it's sort of between a 35 millimeter, which is very spontaneous, and a more formal camera. So you can sort of take pictures very quickly, and yet you can also compose very well with them.
How many shots?
Oh,
is
you
on
get 12.
You only get 12. And will they continue to make this film? Because you develop yourself, right?
Yeah, I used to, but now I use a lab. But no, actually, Kodak, went bankrupt.
I know. What are you going to do?
Well, I may eventually get a digital camera. They're very good for color.
But do you shoot in color?
I actually, almost everything I shot in black and white, I also shot in color.
So when you did the tribal work, you did it in
Yes.
color as well?
Because I was working for school textbooks and magazines, which often use color.
You talked about your sister, and I think she was an integral part of this exhibit
Story,
that we were
sure.
talking about. And this San Francisco 1964 was at the DeYoung Museum.
Yes.
So tell us how this came about.
It's a wonderful story. First, I had been living in Mexico around 1963, and I had never been to the West Coast. So I had an older sister, Madeline, who was a lawyer, and she was a lesbian. So she had moved to San Francisco for a kind of freer lifestyle. And also, she was a little bit persecuted in Washington, D.C., and she had lost her security. She had been working for the government, and because she was gay, she had lost her security clearance. So she had moved to San Francisco around 1960. So I went to pay her a trip, and I just wandered around San Francisco for the first time, and wonderful, struck by the beautiful light and clear, very sharp light. And so it kind of affected the way I was photographing. But I was there about 6 months, and they had some interesting events happen.
It was interesting. You were there during that period of a lot of special things, 1964. Tell us what they were.
Well, I think probably the first, which was in April of 1964, were the first civil rights demonstrations.
We have some pictures in here.
Sure.
Go on.
And it grew out of the free speech movement in Berkeley, kind of drifted over to San Francisco, which at that time had a large black population, which has since been driven out to Oakland because of the rising real estate prices. In San Francisco, on Van Ness Avenue, there was something called Auto Dealer Row, and it was all Chevrolet and Cadillac, and there were no black salesmen. So people just protested and demonstrated in front of these different showrooms, and San Francisco had never seen anything like that. And so a few months later, they did win an agreement with the auto dealers that they would hire more black salesmen.
And who is this person just standing there?
Well, I think he was one of the demonstrators.
And then you have other people watching.
Yeah, as I said, San Francisco was kind of a conservative city, run by a couple of very wealthy families. And this was 3 years before the Summer of Love. The beatniks had left, and so it was a very quiet town. So
You also had
the Beatles had come to the Cow Palace, and I believe gave their last concert in the United States. And of course they were very popular. And so during a political rally for Governor Stanton of Pennsylvania, who was a moderate Republican, in Union Square, a couple of busloads of teenage girls came charging into the park and began shouting, Ringo for president.
Would you describe your work as street art?
Well, it's kind of, I consider it kind of social surrealism.
Because then your work goes into a dreamlike state.
Yeah, it always, I don't really see too much difference between dream and reality, working very spontaneously or setting things up.
I love this.
Yeah, I think everything really is a kind of projection of my own mind.
So you saw this in a store window?
Yes.
One of the things that you said were there were a lot of things like this in small store windows.
Yes, I think, and it still exists in certain old neighborhoods of San Francisco, like around the Mission District. You can find these mom and pop stores where people made these very interesting still lifes of different objects. And actually, I think they took a kind of pride. They were always kind of humorous, interesting juxtapositions.
I love the way the book is set up, though. You have this mannequin's head and you have this guy looking at him.
And he's also has his eyes closed.
Yeah. How did you do that? And how did they choose what work to put at the DeYoung?
Well, the way the DeYoung exhibit came about, most of these large West Coast museums, unfortunately, neglect the local artists and the local art scene until recently.
Totally.
It took 40 years for LACMA to do California Design Show finally.
They look to the east instead of to their own.
Really kind of often boring New York painters.
Right.
So the director of the DeYoung kind of thought we need to do more San Francisco-oriented exhibits. And they did an exhibit of San Francisco painting of the 20s and 30s. But then, just accidentally, my sister had passed away. And in cleaning out her house, I had found this box of old San Francisco photos.
That's how it came.
And I had forgotten about them. And so I have a friend who works as the picture framer for the DeYoung. And he said, the curator at the museum might be interested.
That was a good point.
Yes, so I just said, let's try it. and gave him a call, and he said, okay, I'll look at it. You know, well, he wasn't expecting very much, but it turned out he was very surprised how amazing these photos were.
And they were photos that you took and you developed, and it was all your hand.
Yeah, I developed them in a public darkroom in San
That's what was so interesting, too.
Yeah,
We're,
which still exists.
Which still exists?
Yeah, it's called the Harvey Milk
Oh, it is?
Photo Center.
I know you do a lot. You don't set up things too much, but you set up a portrait of me.
Yes.
And how did you decide where to put me?
Okay, it's interesting. I kind of do improvised environmental portraiture. It's a little different. It's just I get very intense, and I kind of, even though I'd never met you before,
Right.
I have intuitive, psychic, intuitions about people, but I also had, maybe I looked at some of your videos, and there was something about Armenia, and then you were wearing a cross,
right.
and so I said, well, she must be involved in that in some interesting way, and so and it was kind of accidental. We did it outside the gallery, but
Outside the Rose Gallery in the Bergamot Station, yeah.
There was an iron ladder against a wall, and it kind of made a pattern that looked like a 35mm film strip.
Oh, it did. That's right.
And there's a very famous photograph by George Platt Lyons of Jean Cocteau looking at the camera, and he has his hand behind a ladder that looks like a 35mm film strip because he made films. So somehow I thought you were that same kind of conversational
That's
bright
so
person.
great. I love that.
And
Because it was interesting when I came in, you went, okay, let's go over there. I
No,
have
I
it
was
already.
I amazed
And you
myself.
did. You went boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom. Okay, it's over.
I don't know why I don't know why I'm not like rich like Anne Leibovitz.
But we do have to go. But I just wanted
Oh,
to say one
okay.
thing is you did go to film school, and I found some of your work so Fellini-like and so
Yeah.
Visconti-oriented and influenced. And I think that's what you
Yeah.
said did happen to you.
Well, the Fellini, you know, it's called magic realism, where the surrealism and fantasy grows out of just the everyday and ordinary.
And you found it.
And I found it.
Thank you so much.
All right.
And thanks for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles today. Keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com. See you next time.